Thank you, everyone, for coming. I was thinking back this morning to our first LP day. I think, Rebecca, you come to that one at that time. And things have evolved quite a bit since then. I think that time we were about 15 of us in our upstairs cafe in the office. And now we're about, I think, 30 people today, a few more coming in during the day. So it's heartening, it's nice, and it is quite honestly all because of the entrepreneurs that we work with. And so today is really going to be about them and them telling the stories about what they've done and how they've been evolving and building their businesses. And we've just been fortunate to work with some really interesting companies and people. I'm going to start by talking about supermodels because, you know, that's what we do. We talk about risque items here. But it is, in fact, supermodels. The crux of what we invest in is really interesting models. And I think those models are what really define why we're able to find businesses and do things that are disruptive. Start by just setting some context around India. I think we've all generally accept the idea that we're a large market. I think that's one of the larger reasons why people come here and are interested in it. Our growth is consumption-led. And I think that's important because I think that's been historically one of the things that everyone felt would make sure that India didn't go through dips due to FDI and dips due to change of investment philosophy. That's true and not true. And I'm not making conclusions out of these right now. I just want to set the context correctly. We have a low per capita GDP. Now, this has lots of implications. It has implications for ad revenue. It has implications for sectors and how niches can grow. And I think believing that this $1,500 will go to $8,000 anytime soon is a fallacy. We have to start to accept this. And actually, accepting this is really good, because there are very interesting opportunities that emerge when you start to think about the market in this context. We've always talked about the fact that India is fragmented. It's a theme that exists throughout the last 4 years and what we've thought about. It's going to get more fragmented as we think about markets and segments to go after. In the next 5 years, we'll have 120 cities with over 1 million people in population. Later today, when actually Sid will be talking about Melora, we'll talk about the fact that the idea of tier 1 is actually a bit of a misnomer. When you look at it, metros itself are about 53 cities in this country, and those metros are places that have over 1 million people in population. The US, to put it in perspective, has 11 cities with over 1 million people. So we're going to have an extremely large number of highly dense cities where rental costs are going to be high, and really tech-enabled opportunities are going to be the way of how we're going to have to address these markets. Which brings me to tech. We read a lot about millennial, Gen Y, Gen Z. India is effectively a Gen Z country in the sense that many people are going to come into consumption in a mobile world. They're not coming in having gone to the mall. They're not coming in used to buying brands that are scaled up. They're coming in not knowing any different but to buy things actually on their phone. And so as a result, we've seen a massive jump over the last year just in that enablement. We were talking earlier just now about 5G and the implication that's going to have. I think all of these are opportunities that you're not going to have to battle incumbency on. So as a result, you're going to be in a market that's going to move immediately to a mobile world. And that's happening with data prices dropping drastically. That data price drop has resulted in people spending 200 minutes a day on average on their phone. So spending 3 hours a day, and I think 50% of that time people are spending on social networking, which is insane. And so these are behavior changes that are going to define a large part of how people are going to actually have to consider their businesses in the future, and actually are going to give opportunities for us to really think about how brands are going to be built. We are the last major frontier. 35% is online. This is nowhere near the levels that you've seen in the US, and definitely not even the levels that you've seen in China yet. So we have a long way to go. I think Africa is probably the only other market left beyond this, but that's even more fragmented as it were to be. So as a result, I think we have a big opportunity on that side, and we're just getting started with all of this. I think the analogy for India has always been it's an airplane on the runway waiting to take off. I think the trends that we're starting to see in e-commerce, the numbers that you'll hear from our companies later today, will show you that some of this is actually happening. The numbers and the scale are setting in. But it's still nowhere near having taken off. There's a statement that data is the new oil. We've seen this with Reliance getting into data in a big way. We already make up 22% of the internet. I mean, that's crazy. I think one day WhatsApp had said that Indians were flooding their system with good morning messages. I'm not saying we're using the internet in the smartest way possible, but we're definitely using the internet, which is a start. So if data is going to be the new oil, we are going to create a ton of it. And so as a result, the opportunities to really think about how businesses can work using that data is where the differentiation is going to lie. And I think that that's where we focus our energy within our portfolio as well. Not doing the same old thing. Anybody can put a billboard up. Anybody can buy an ad in a newspaper. How are we going to use the data of usage of what people are doing on our systems to be more intelligent? What's happening in aggregate to build the right businesses? Now, the government's a hard one. We put this together late last night, and this morning again, there's more news, and I think things keep changing. But putting aside the noise for a second, the general direction, I would say, is positive. We're improving on the Ease of Business Index. We have a government who has helped on the PR side. I think 4 or 5 years ago when I would go out to talk to people about it, I was having to sell a lot of India. And I think that when you're talking to investors about the market, you're either selling India, you're selling venture, or you're selling your fund. I think for a long time I was selling India. And if I'm there, there's a problem. And I think Modi's done a good job at least of reinvigorating the focus on tech and done a lot within that area of talking about it. Startup India as an initiative was good. All of this said, there's still a lot of challenges. And I think those are realities of India. I was talking to someone yesterday and they were saying, but why does it have to be this way? I mean, I think you have to give up that view when you're working here. It is this way, and we kind of work with it. Digital money has come about in a significant way. Now again, there are varying views as to whether this has been done the right way or not, but it's moving. And it's definitely moving in a direction, and the government is playing an active role in it, which again, can be debated as to whether or not that's a good idea or a bad idea, but they're definitely involved in it. UPI transactions are significantly up, both in terms of volume and value. And if you look at that, 312 million transactions in August, compared to, after 20 years, card transactions are 420 million. So UPI is definitely shifting it. And by the way, this, on the consumer side, has a big impact for businesses that are payment processors. And we're seeing them start to focus their attention on the B2B side, which is a very interesting shift as well. Wallets. And this is the problem or the challenge or the opportunity in India. If you were sitting in September or July of 2017, the wallet world was a great world. Wallets were going to be dominant. Everyone needed a wallet. Ola had a wallet, Book My Show had a wallet, Flipkart had a wallet, Cleartrip had a wallet. Wallets were the answer to the world. Go forward, and this is September to March. This isn't even a full year. UPI transactions dominated it, wiped it out, changed the entire landscape. So you have to be cognizant of these things and decide which areas you're going to get into and decide what government role is going to end up playing within that. On the investment side, things are good. They're not great. They're good. It's continued to grow, held steady, I would say, more than anything else. Global guys are paying attention, some good, some bad. I think we've seen in the case of Furlenco, the question always was, what happens when IKEA comes? IKEA's come, it's great. I mean, IKEA's premise has always been well-designed, cost-effective furniture. Furlenco's premise has been well-designed, cost-effective furniture with a different model. And I think that model has made all the difference. But I think the fact that people are coming in, the fact that people are taking notice is only going to be positive for us. Many of you have seen our earlier presentations where we talk about Mr. Fatbug. Mr. Fatbug is our response to Bat and Fang. Mr. Fatbug is basically the acronym for the fact that global companies will be acquirers of our businesses here. And I think that's going to be the case, and they're already getting very involved across the board. You saw it with Flipkart. Mr. Fatbug didn't have a W. I have to figure out how to fit that in. But this was one. We've seen it with domestic players. This is Aditi and the team at Imbibe, and this has probably been one of the most heartening occurrences for us, where a company that has been an investment of ours, which is Pure Tech. This is a Pure Tech business where we took a decision to go long on the idea of investing in a platform and continuing at a time when it was questionable as to what the monetization would look like. To have another company that's been a traditional business in a world of real assets look at this and say, we get it. We get that the technology is the answer to solving education. Aditi is now leading education across geo for them. It's a fantastic opportunity. I mean, we see what's happening with Baiju. I think, again, today they raised another amount of money at another ridiculous valuation. I think these guys are gonna give everybody a massive run for their money across the board, and I think education can significantly change as a result of this partnership here. I think the other reality of the market is sentiment sways by what happens up here. These are your large guys, your people raising 2 billion, 100 million, 500 million, seemingly every 2 weeks. But while that's happening, the rest of the market has kind of stayed in a range. And I think that's important to recognize. And I think oftentimes, if you come from the outside or you don't follow this industry on a regular basis, you get swayed by what happens. Everyone's in Flipkart, everyone's out of Flipkart. Everyone's in Oyo, everyone's out of Oyo. Oh, it sucks, it's working, it's not. It doesn't matter. I mean, again, our portfolio companies give us the conviction here because we've been seeing their operating numbers. We've been seeing how their products have developed. We've been seeing customer adoption. And we're confident this stuff is working and the rest of the market is fine. This then brings me to thinking about the consumer. Ultimately, look, we are a consumer-focused venture fund. And for us, as much as I want to talk about the macro and believe that that's going to dictate how we think about it, it's really consumer trends that drive it. This happened this year. A guy at the foothills of the Himalayas finally was able to buy a fridge, not because he didn't want a fridge before. Practicality was he just couldn't get one. And so for him, at $2 a month for the internet, he's now suddenly plugged into commerce. And he has the ability. That brings me back to that slide earlier of 120 cities with over 1 million people in population. There are, I think, about 600,000 PIN codes in general where consumption is going to take place. And again, when we'll talk later about what we've seen in the case of jewelry and the fact that adoption is happening in all of these areas. The railways, again, coming to that lower end of the segment, 70% of their tickets are now booked online. They have always been, and I remember when I came in 2005, the biggest e-commerce site in Asia was the IRCTC, the Indian Railways. Today, they may not be the biggest, but they're definitely propagating this as a way in which they want to do things. Renting. I mean, this is something that when we started off, we had to get our heads around as well. The idea of access over ownership. I think that in general, I have 2 young kids. My son, buying stuff is not important to him. He's just not interested anymore. I think this idea of renting is not just something that's going to happen in one segment or the idea of access over ownership is something that's happening across the board. You're seeing this everywhere. Never need to buy, the boom in renting, everything from furniture to vehicles. Subscription is a way of life. This is not just in India. You're seeing this in the US. Excuse me. Experiences are a big part of where consumers are going as well. This was a tie-up between Saregama and Harman Kardon. They put out a box, which, again, I'll tell you, I have a hard time understanding this, and I'm a music lover, but they put out a box preloaded with content, and they give you an app, and that app then lets you stream stuff through the box. So it's basically a speaker, but the speaker comes preloaded with Hindi, Tamil, Bengali, Marathi music. So you get about 5,000 songs. Pricing ranges from, I think, 5,000 to 12,000 rupees. And they've sold 1 million pieces in 16 months. And it's doing really well. Now, the reason is, apparently, people put this box in their house in the middle, and everybody listens to music together. So it's a connected speaker with old content, and they've just created it around the idea of an experience. And it's caught on really well. I think premium for design and premium for quality is a reality. You know, there's always this statement, no, India doesn't care about that. India wants chaos. India doesn't want high quality. Jugaad was this thought that, you know, we'll just cobble it together and that works here. I think that's dead as an idea. Focus on great quality product, focus on design, and that's applying everywhere. Here, I think 50% of our sales come from non-metros. And the average selling price is equal, if not greater, to what we're seeing in metros for a jewelry business. So it's clear consumers want good product. Consumers want convenience as well. ID Fresh has taken what was a very complicated, time-intensive task of making idli batter and said, we'll just centralize this. We'll scale it up and we'll do it for you in a really convenient way. pre-packaging it, and this is really interesting because vadas, for people not from India, fried donut, basically. What they did is they created the packaging such that you just squeeze it in the oil and the hole is right there in the middle, so you don't have to worry about it. Thoughtfulness around packaging has actually enabled them now to get to a point where we believe they're doing about 100 million in revenue. They are very also conscious, and these guys, as well as many of the other companies we're talking about, this idea of wellness and products not having chemicals and being natural, this is a trend that's coming across a lot of areas. And people are willing to pay for it. This is just an example. Tata Salt iodized versus Tata Salt light. Honestly, I don't know the difference between the two, but this is healthier for you, and people are willing to pay a premium for it. And people are willing to pay a premium across the board. So again, this idea that we don't care. And I actually think it comes from the fact that people are exposed to content right now like they never have been before. All those people online, 22% of the world's traffic coming here, they're going to YouTube, they're learning about these ideas, they're exposed to the same concepts that the West has. So therefore, the trends that are happening in the West are happening concurrently here as well. And so that really shows us that the market is looking for new areas. Natural as well. This was really interesting for us. Wow, as a shampoo, I'm saying wow. Wow is the brand. Wow as a shampoo brand actually is one of the largest selling consumer product brands on Amazon. Their sales have jumped drastically, and they're primarily an online product. And so that's their channel that they sell. Chemical-free brand of cosmetics. This is more expensive than whatever Unilever is selling out there in the market. Wellness is a big part of where things are going. If you look at it, Raw created the category of cold-pressed juices. They forced and pushed Nature's Basket as well into that category also. Juices in general in India were a very interesting market, never really grew in a branded way. The organized players, whether it's Dabur or Tropicana, aren't very big at all here. And I think what these guys have tapped into is this idea that you want that fresh juice and you want it in a way that is actually accessible and convenient. Again, that same notion. HRX, a brand, again, focused on wellness, bought by Myntra recently. Content is another big part of what consumers are chasing and looking for. Nua, which is a company you'll hear from later today as well, have built a business by addressing a topic that people have avoided. Feminine care products, sanitary pads. If you look at how Whisper and Stay Free market, they avoid the entire issue around what is actually happening during that time of the month for a woman and what are the challenges and issues they're facing. These guys took it head on. They create Facebook AMA sessions where they bring gynecologists in, they're able to give people the opportunity to talk about it, understand what's happening, and that's resulted in massive following. In 6 months, they've grown their Instagram following to 22,000 people versus the two largest brands who are sitting well below that. Content is going to be a big part of how we're able to build brands moving forward. So Google had a session, and Kawaljeet is the CTO at NDTV. He was there, and he tweeted after it that India is the only country in the world where YouTube has more unique visitors than Google. We are a video-first country, and video is going to be a big part of it. Video shares about 75% of our mobile traffic. And we're giving the world a run for its money. For anybody kind of following the video world, this is the biggest battle going on right now. And if we had a live ticker here, I would show you what the numbers were changing on. But T-Series, a music brand, is challenging a gaming company on global traffic to see who has the largest number of subscribers. They were at 30 million at the beginning of the year. It's 73 million now, and I think we're adding 141,000 daily. So these are people going on, and quite honestly, they're going on as a free way to listen to music. And that's quite compelling. And suddenly you start to say, on one side, India as a country is building a massive user base, or as a diaspora, let's say, building a massive user base around music. The rest of the world is building it around watching someone play a video game. I don't know what that means, but it's clearly different, and it's clearly something that, as we think about what's happening here, it's something we'll have to continue to watch. 95% of this video consumption is in regional languages. So again, that fragmentation comes into play here as well. Because of the regional language, voice becomes a very big part of how navigation will take place. QWERTY keyboards are not necessarily intuitive for every other dialect. And so as a result, voice search continues to grow as a big part of what we see. In all of this, leveraging that data, personalization really becomes a big part of where this information and these products can go. It's not enough to just say, I will bring you a platform where you can access content. Again, if we're taking this data, and this is what Imbibe did. Imbibe built its business around the idea of understanding the user extremely well to then give them personalized service to be able to navigate and do better on the exam. This is something that a lecture hall like this could never do. You could never talk to each person individually and say, this is what you need, this is what you need, this is what you need. A system actually does this, and I think that's a big part of what consumers will continue to want and pay for. So we kind of talked about where the market is at a high level. We've talked about some of the consumer trends that we see happening. What I want to get to now is really the cost structure advantages that these things bring about and what we really look for as we think about businesses. So Rebel Foods, which many of you know as Fasos from earlier, basically changed the entire cost structure of the QSR business. And I think that when we think about markets and we think about opportunities, these are what I mean by cost structures. I'm being very specific here because I want to go through explaining why we say yes or no to certain opportunities and what we're really hoping to find in them. In the traditional restaurant world, one kitchen meant one brand. That one kitchen, one brand meant that you spent a lot of time and money trying to figure out where to locate it, trying to figure out what product would sell, and from that, you would either be right or wrong. Actually, as a matter of fact, 65% of restaurants shut within 1 year, and 85% shut within 5 years. So it's a model that becomes very difficult to continue to scale up, and very expensive as a result. What Rebel did was they said, all right, I've got a kitchen, no one's walking into it. Your problem with going to McDonald's and asking for Chinese food is you don't really believe McDonald's will make good Chinese food. So you're never going to do it. So as much as McDonald's wants to get into the salad business, they have a hurdle to overcome. For Rebel, nobody's walking into our kitchen. As a result, we can make whatever we want from that kitchen. And that's exactly what the team did. They went into biryani, they went into Chinese food, they went into pizza, they went to continental cuisine. And what that allowed us to do was, over time, costs run like this at the rate of inflation. So if costs are going to continue to go up, your raw materials, your labor, a business in the restaurant space usually takes an S-curve. It takes a while to build, it flattens, and then it goes up, and then it flattens again. Sorry, it rises and then it flattens again. By having one infrastructure and adding multiple brands, you're riding multiple S-curves. This means this can go in perpetuity. JD basically designed the business to last for 300 years. None of us will know whether that works or not, but I'm hopeful that it will be the case. It's played out. He's proven it. Beirut, in a span of 18 months, with under 2 million in spend, has grown to about an 18 million annualized revenue business. That 2 million is marketing spend. Zero capex, zero risk. That's a structural cost advantage. That's something no existing QSR business can do, and that's something that gives us a ton of value going forward. We're taking that same idea, and he just announced, I think 2-3 days ago, the launch pad. And so the idea is people have food missions. And the food missions really are around either family and friends and colleagues, single serve meals, either value or indulgence. And we're not going to create all of them. And this is really now platformizing the business. They launched a $15 million fund to actually fund entrepreneurs to do this. And I think that's another massive change in what the cost structure is going to be for new businesses in this industry. I talked a little bit about personalization before as well. What we did here in Imbibe's case, and again, a structural advantage that we looked at, we were able to take our technology platform, ingest data, be very good at mapping this to different concepts. So if you are learning physics, it's not enough to tell you, do more physics questions and you'll do better. When you get question 2, 14, and 23 wrong, we tell you that you messed up in a concept of force or acceleration. And I think that was key to be able to create a system that could automatically ingest that content, tag it, and then give people question papers and then direct them in the way that made sense. A traditional business, a traditional tuition program, has businesses with limited reach, they have high rental costs to set up, and we have a shortfall of talent in terms of teachers. Actually, talent in many areas, healthcare, teachers, doctors, all of this are problems that exist. Platforms change that game entirely. And that's what we were able to do here. By personalizing and leveraging AI, we were actually able to create a system that was free of those. Similar in concept is Flinto, and the idea that we have 20 million kids born every year. I just talked about the teacher deficit that exists. People set up preschools in their living rooms and call people home and say, we'll run a preschool. Now, that's fine, and that's a good way to occupy your child, but ultimately, people are now recognizing, again, with the advent of content and information, the importance of early learning. So as that becomes more prevalent, they're going to search for schooling that's actually of a high quality. With the Flinto platform, what started with a basic box delivered to somebody at home to engage the child more effectively than random toys or iPads or devices, moved into a system that actually allows us to put a school up anywhere. We've created Flinto Class as a product. This brings, again, the same structural advantage. We're giving you a structured curriculum at low cost, delivered to you monthly for each of the students in your living room, so if it were, or under a tree, as I think Arun has talked about here. That's a massive change in the cost structure of what it takes to actually set up a preschool. Droom fundamentally made information available and changed the cost of selling a car. A used car purchase process typically involves lots of difficult steps along the way. Many people call you if you're selling a car. You're trying to figure out who's real, who's not real. You then have a sub-dealer network because as a dealer, you actually don't have enough working capital to keep rotating cars. So you're trying to move the car as fast as possible. You'll call a friend. You'll tell them, look, if you do it, I'll give you a commission. You'll put ads in various sites that are driven just to create awareness. All of this adds up to about 10% of the value of the vehicle. And that 10% of the value of the vehicle doesn't come, also by the way, comes with a massive time sink, which is not calculated in that. What Droom said is, I'm going to change the equation here. I'm going to create a platform that allows all the information to exist. I'm going to provide you the history of the vehicle. I'm going to provide you the state of the vehicle with mechanics that actually certify it. I'm going to give you pricing in the market so that you know what's happening. What that does is allows this one seller and one buyer to automatically connect on one platform and have a cost of only 2% of the vehicle. Now, we can take this up a little bit here and there, but ultimately, if I look at it, 10% versus 2%. Massive structural change in the way the industry works. I alluded to this before with Melora, but it's one of those that I think has really surprised us and opened us up to a lot of other areas. If you look at it, Tanishq as a business, this is their model. Walk into a physical jeweler. Sit there, look at the item, decide what you like, buy it and leave. This is massive working capital. This is massive impediment to scaling into geographies. They are in 127 cities after about 25 years of operation. We have already shipped to 600 locations in the country. We have zero inventory. What that means is we can iterate and roll out more designs on a regular basis much faster than anybody else. And as I talk about fashion in a minute, you'll understand the importance of that. We have on 0.3% of the revenue greater margins than Tanishq. That's insane. We've changed the entire dynamic of how jewelry can be thought about. It is now a fashion product, not an investment product, where you think about making charges as how you look at it. So that's a shift in the cost structure of the industry. So that's a few examples from our world. I think what I wanted to spend some time on today as well is talking about the future and some of the other areas that we're thinking about and how we're thinking and looking for these cost advantages here. I'll tell you up front, we don't have answers in many of these areas. Our intention today is just to lay out our thinking, and over the course of the day, we'd be very interested in talking to you guys about what you think and what you've seen in other markets as well. In FMCG, as I mentioned earlier, product can be a major point of innovation and change in cost structure. Thinking about customer acquisition differently is another business model shift that I think can yield a cost advantage, and distribution. And again, with Nuo, you'll hear later today about how going direct is a big part of what they believe can change how the market looks at that product. In this, I think there are two broad things you can think about. You can either look at creating a new category. So what Raw did with cold pressed juices was really explore how cold pressed juices could come about. They talk about their business and they'd say that they didn't have to create the category, they had to create the shelf. They had to physically find a shelf. And actually, in their case, they actually brought the shelf to the shops, and they did that. Or you can revitalize the category. And the most famous global example is Dollar Shave Club, changing the entire conversation from one of talking about, are you buying a blade with 15 more blades on it, and is it going to do backflips and this and that? Or do you want a product that works at a price that's good? And change the entire conversation of that. I think that the reason why this is an interesting and compelling time to look at it is there's this idea of unscaling. And the notion that, again, I mentioned earlier, data, personalization are going to drive the ability for regional brands to actually emerge and regional products to actually become very compelling. So if you look at this, this is the growth in small companies versus the big FMCG businesses. And so regional brands have seen a higher growth over the last couple of years as opposed to, or actually over the last 2 years, as opposed to the national brands. This is not just an India phenomenon. This is happening in the US as well. So if you look at it, small FMCG, and I appreciate this is hard to see, but in general, they represented about 57% of it. It's dropped to about 55%. So you're seeing a shift, and you're seeing smaller brands, extra small brands, and mid-sized brands start to grow and take more share away. That's going to happen here as well, just because it's possible. It's possible, and in India, what people want in South Bombay is different from what people want in West Bombay, is different from what people want in North Bombay. That in and of itself should lead you to believe that what people want in North India and South India are definitely going to be different. And if you have the platform, you have the production capability, and you have the communication capacity to actually address those needs differentially, I think that's going to be what people want. And as a result, it's going to move away from this idea of centralized one brand doing all. There will be efficiencies that will be gained from centralizing certain functions, but it may not necessarily be in creating one brand that addresses everything. The other reason as investors this is interesting for us is global M&A in consumer goods is at an all-time high. People need to buy more stuff. They realize that internally these big companies are not figuring it out themselves. It's going to happen here as well in India. You've seen it with some of the investments that have already taken place, whether it's Marico in the Bombay Shaving Company, was this? Sorry? Beardo, sorry. Wipro with Ustra, Imami with the Man Company, Colgate did the Bombay Shaving Company. These are all happening. They're realizing that tapping into these companies is the only way they'll be able to figure out how to tap into these niches. And as these niches get bigger, it's only going to become more attractive for them to do that. Content is another area where we spend a lot of time and think a lot about what's going on. So 10% of India speaks English. We are in that 10% here. 175 million English language internet users, 234 million regional language users. This is going to be a big part of how we need to think about businesses. How are we going to address this segment of people that are not communicating the way we are? From Google data, they're telling us that 4.5x growth in Hindi searches, 1.8x growth in other language searches. These are the topics that are growing in these areas. Government, automobiles, internet services. It's interesting. I mean, I think we're seeing an array of topics. I think the more the bigger takeaway from all of this is that local language is growing in a big way, and I think businesses need to think about how they're going to communicate there. States where this is happening are, again, states that don't have a large metro. So now that whole idea that India is all about these big metros and that's where we're going to sell stuff isn't necessarily going to be the case. More and more people are getting online in places where there aren't actually big cities where you're going to be able to just set up shop and sell a product. How are you going to reach them? How are you going to sell product to them? Again, technology-enabled solutions become interesting. Regional language users, again, looking at it from KPMG and Google's projections here, say online news, e-tailing, these are all going to happen in this mix across the board. Now, these are projections, but I think indicatively it shows you that e-commerce in regional languages is going to be a big part of what's going to happen moving ahead. Amazon recently launched a Hindi website, and they were very clear that 8 out of 10 customers prefer to shop in a language other than English. They said half of the queries that came into their customer service department came in a language other than English. So again, we can keep looking at this and saying, all right, we're going to build everything in this way, build everything for India generically, but in fact, I think once you regionalize, you end up in a situation where you can do a lot more. And I think that regionalization is not just a Google Translate on your website. It has to be something more that considers, in fact, what these customers want differentially. And I think companies are buying into this, and investors are seeing this. $300 million has been invested so far in businesses focused on local content. Now, if I go back and talk a little bit about the per capita GDP in India, at about 1,700 in per capita, ad spends in India are really low. And it makes sense. If you're not able to buy a lot, what am I going to spend a lot of money advertising to? So as a result, ad models become a little bit challenging in this context. And as a result, when we look at all of this, sorry, I'll come back to that point in a second. Actually, the US market captured urban India, and actually what we were saying here as well was that the Chinese have actually stepped into rural India. And actually when you look and you read about this, their effort in these regions has been insane. They go into the rural markets, they spend a lot of time there. TikTok, I think they're at 100 million users now, and they're adding a massive number in India on a regular basis. Sorry? 500 million. So the Chinese companies are among the largest downloaded apps in the Google Play Store. So when we look at this, it's not a simple matter of translating a product from one side to the other. When you think about regional languages, these consumers are not necessarily used to buying online or used to consuming necessarily any of these services online. It's going to require hand-holding. It's going to require a different interface, we believe. It's going to require a thought on how behavior works here. People use Facebook here to discover, not to share. And they use WhatsApp to share, not to communicate. So when you think about these nuances, you then have to think about how will businesses take advantage of that and actually consider what you will do regionally. It's not so simple as to take a Malora website and translate it into Gujarati and say now people will buy. There's an entirely different process there. Now the models that could emerge here, because again, if the ad dollars don't exist, and if content businesses, all content businesses historically have been ad driven, they're media companies, then really the question becomes, is it going to be microtransactions, sachets? Godrej popularized this years back with sachets shampoos and realizing that people don't want to buy the full bottle. They want to buy the 2 rupee bottle. And so as a result, what can you do with microtransactions? And I really believe that's where your share chats, your bite dances are going to have to go in a market like India, is really look at thinking about, are people going to buy micro products within that? The other, which Haiku Jam is doing a very interesting job of now, is providing insights. All that data tells us a ton about users. And later on, Drew will talk to you a little bit about what we've actually learned from it. This was, they asked millennials about car ownership. And the thoughts that came back were quite interesting because on one side, straightforward, dream, aspiration, all of that seemed to make sense. But on the other side, people were worried about pollution, noise, Uber. Uber was the most referred brand when you talked about car ownership. So if you're a brand thinking about how to reach consumers, how do you leverage this content and insight to actually think about what to do moving forward? FinTech is, I think, probably one of the most sought after and talked about spaces around there. As we've thought about FinTech on the consumer side, we've kind of broken it up into 4 sections. Payments, consumer finance, insurance, and asset management. And there are businesses around all of these. And trust me, we've broken our head trying to understand what to do in this area and talk to lots of people. I think in general, as we talk about it and think about it, all roads seem to come back to lending. So no matter what you do, you end up back in the world of saying, how do I give this guy money and make a spread on that in some way, shape, or form? 225 companies in the lending space as of 2017. It's the second most funded segment in FinTech. In general, financial services businesses are built around these 3 areas. I acquire a customer, I underwrite risk to them, and I have to collect money. If that's essentially what's happening, anybody who has a disproportionate advantage in one of these 3 areas is better positioned to win. We're struggling right now to understand how a startup on its own coming into this has an advantage in any of these areas. So as a result, we really start to think, is FinTech really a misnomer? Is it really just financial services using technology? And if that's the case, ultimately, is FinTech really a feature? And again, someone beat us to saying it on Twitter, but I believe this is right. And the idea that anybody who has a user base is already in a better position to actually address the market. They have customer acquisition sorted, they more likely than not have better data, and they have a better ability to collect. And I think you're beginning to see this. We looked at insurance, for example, for a while, and you're beginning to see if the ability to underwrite at a micro level comes about, then the ability for people on their own to provide that insurance becomes readily available. They have the capital. If I'm buying a Tesla and Tesla is going to charge me an extra little amount for the insurance with it, Why do I need to go to Bajaj or Allstate or whoever it is? If I'm buying an Apple Watch and it's monitoring my heart rate and it knows my perspiration levels, it is in a better position to underwrite my health insurance than any other third party will with any amount of data. Similarly, Droom, with all the information that we have about the value of the vehicles, the state of the vehicle, the actual history of the vehicle, credit is something we're going to be in a fantastic position to enable. And I think that 2% that we talked about spread that we're making, let's say today on it, can grow massively because of the data that we have and the ability to provide credit. Why is any other bank going to be in any better position than us to actually enable that for a consumer? For Lenco, again, access over ownership is nothing more than financing for a customer. I'm giving you a product that you're not getting in any other way by working with us and us taking on that burden. It creates challenges for the business on this side, but those challenges that we have are massive moats. The amount of debt that we've had to figure out how to raise for that business, the sources that we've had to go to find them, I don't think anybody can wake up in the morning and do that, which is great for us. Now, it's been a hard road, and I'm sure Ajit will talk to you about the road traveled there, but ultimately, it's a benefit for the consumer because it's financing in a very different way. So that brings me to fashion and really what we see happening in apparel there. So when we think about it, finding sustainable businesses in apparel in a fast fashion world is really hard. It's a $2 trillion apparel market out there, and I think the largest company, Inditex, is at about 20 billion. So building large, sustained businesses in fashion is difficult. And it's wasteful, quite honestly. And when you have a market and a segment where there's a ton of waste going on, manufacturing of low-cost, low-quality apparel seems to be the direction. Someone else was telling me, Uniqlo is great. I buy it and I throw it out after 5 wears because that's the model. If you're moving into products like that and that's the approach, I think that's going to be really difficult moving ahead. Questionable working conditions. All of these are challenges of the market. Now, there's different approaches to it. Everlane in the US has taken this idea of, I'm going to make it transparent. I'm going to tell you what you're getting, and you're going to pay a premium for that. You're going to be willing to pay because you appreciate what you're getting here, and you appreciate the idea that you're transforming the purchasing process here. Doodleage is a company we've met here, which again, very interesting because what they're doing is they're taking the scraps of the textile industry and making apparel out of it. They're making really fashionable product, and right now they're selling at a premium. We're not yet convinced that this is a structural advantage. It's interesting, it's compelling, but tomorrow when the fabrics change or when waste suddenly becomes valuable, what will happen to their structural advantages if this were it? So it's a thought, and it's an area we're evaluating. Bombay Shirt Company is a company you'll hear from in a bit today as well. They're really approaching this idea of mass customization. How do I change the very nature of how you think about a product that you're buying, a shirt right now? They've decided that if I can distribute my manufacturing using a technology platform and have multiple tailors make the product to my specifications, if I can acquire customers over here and know a lot about them, not just the fact that they buy a shirt or that they buy a pant, but I know their measurements. I know in detail exactly how they fit and what they're looking at. I can retain them more effectively, and I can scale my manufacturing. This is a mix of online and offline. And again, you'll hear from them how that model has worked and how they're actually scaling it in a profitable way. Brings back a lot of similarities to what I talked about with Rebel and how they've been able to grow a business. Finally, I think data, again, is going to play a role in fashion. And I guess it's scary when you consider the idea that based on what you watch on Netflix, they design the shows. So Kevin Spacey starring in House of Cards was a direct correlation for who they felt was the right person to play in that role there. I'm sure there are more actors that have come in as a result of the data telling them what to program and what show to create. Fashion is moving there. Flipkart says that they have a $20 million brand in Moda Rapido that has basically been designed entirely based on the data of what people are buying on their system. So it's interesting. I believe that over time, that as a platform and data source can be a structural advantage in how we think about fashion. So that's our intro to the market and overview and some of where our thinking is. Just as a takeaway, this guy, the story behind it, he had to climb a tree to find a signal. And so that's what he's up to up there. But I think in general, look, it's been an exciting 4 years. the stories of our entrepreneurs best summarize our learnings and will give you a deeper sense of where we see things going. I think the 4 areas I talked about are areas we're spending a lot more time investigating, and we believe that no matter where we go in this continuum, technology will be at the core of what we will differentiate these businesses. Even if we end up in a real world business, in a physical environment, technology is underlying it. And I think it'll be exciting to see where the next few years takes us. Thank you.